It's season 13. We have entered the newest and longest era of The Simpsons. Mike Scully, who had run the last 4 seasons, left the show, and a familiar face once again took the reins, Mr. Al Jean. He had previously been showrunner for seasons 3 and 4, at that time working as a duo with Mike Reiss. Thankfully, I've already done retrospectives on his previous seasons, so I am sure we are going to get those Jean and Reiss tendencies again. These down-to-earth and approachable character arcs that are densely filled with punchy cutaway gags and pop culture references. A return to a bygone era. Wait a minute, what's this? Completely unrelated Act 1s? Wacky swerve endings? Multiple kidnapping plots? This isn't a new era, this is Diet Season 12. I guess this time we're not doing the chaotic transitional year like Season 9. At first glance, Season 13 appears to be continuing the previous era's major trends. In particular, there's a strong sense of danger to the majority of episodes, including animal attacks, fires, and gunfights. In fact, you could argue Season 13 is one of the most gun-heavy seasons of The Simpsons ever. Moe, Eddie, Krusty, and Fat Tony each take a bullet at some point. Plenty of other small jokes feature characters suddenly brandishing shotguns. Although to be fair, most of these examples are Moe. If you're tired of guns, how about car crashes? Marge, Grandpa, and Moe each crash one of the Simpsons' cars. Bart crashes these bumper cars, Homer and Marge sink a houseboat, which is kinda like a car. There's a strange fixation on unusual driving scenarios, like there are 4 separate instances in which the kids are the ones working the pedals. With all these dangerous plot elements floating around, it's not surprising that Homer takes quite a beating in Season 13. Honestly, I think Homer's body is basically broken at this point. He gets entire episodes about broken jaws and searing eye pain, then his snoring is out of control, his pupils wander randomly, and he gets these rage boils. I'm not going to discuss Dr. Hibbert later in the secondary character breakdown, but let's just say he had another profitable year. Personally, I kind of think of Season 13 as the love and pain year of The Simpsons. We get all these stories with dangerous elements, but the show balances them out with romance plots and character relationship journeys. This is the first major shift in focus. Season 12 preferred relatable topical concepts as the counterbalance, whereas Season 13 prefers relationship stuff. About a third of the season centers around some kind of romance or offbeat love triangle. The house's computer falling in love with Marge, Mr. Burns dating Gloria with Homer's help, then Snake gets in the middle, Bart kinda sorta dates Greta Wolfcastle and then gets dumped from Milhouse, Grandpa pursues Zelda and she runs off with this guy, Apu cheats on Manjula with the squishy lady. Past characters like Artie Ziff and Amber return to give Homer and Marge a good old-fashioned marriage crisis. In addition, Marge finds a new lover with a roll of paper towels. Or maybe that was just a fanfic I read. Either way, the show suddenly seemed more interested in portraying the ins and outs of Homer and Marge's marriage again. I think Season 13, just in general, is a more character-driven year of The Simpsons. Even when doing these more topical stories like The Parent Rap or She of Little Faith, they make sure to emphasize the personal angle. The frying game is completely and utterly cuckoo bananas, but somehow it provides the most emotional moment of the season. Weird. I guess this is the place where I should mention Season 13 isn't exactly the schmaltziest year of The Simpsons. Lots of character-driven stuff, but this isn't a Season 3 or Season 7 where they actively try to tug at your emotions. At the same time, I wouldn't say it's this big satirical year of The Simpsons either, like a Season 5 or something. They're walking this middle road, tackling subjects like medicinal marijuana, Springfield's addiction to sugar, privatized police squads, and the dot-com bubble. However, even these more topical examples tend to keep the scope of the story small. Aside from the Fish concert and a town-wide vote, Weekend at Bernie's sticks to a story about Homer's personal experience puffing the magic dragon. Really, I'd say Sweets and Sour Marge and Papa's Got a Brand New Badge are the only 2 big Springfield episodes, getting the whole town involved. You only get 1 riot from Springfield all year long. I mean, to their credit, it's a pretty big riot, but by Springfield standards, we've got quite the orderly population this time around. Now you'd think, with these more down-to-earth storylines and character-driven concepts, that we'd see less unrelated Act 1s or surprising Act 3 swerves. That with Mike Scully exiting the show, so would these Badger plots. But would you believe that they actually became more prevalent in Season 13? Yeah, it's a bit of a misconception between the Scully and Gene eras of the show. We didn't suddenly go back to season 2 with these straightforward story constructions. No, instead, a fortune cookie story turns into a Burns dating episode. Rocket launches turns into a Lisa Buddhism episode. A world record attempt leads to a sugar ban. A trip to the movies results in Homer breaking his jaw. Crows leads to that sweet, sweet Chiba. There are honestly so many of these, I'd have to list like half of the episodes. To be fair, in some examples, they do call back to these earlier plot elements, so they're not completely disposable. On the other hand, some of the Act 3 swerves are pretty darn jarring, falling somewhere in the kill the alligator and run tier of unpredictability. Brawl in the Family completely changes course halfway through. After the misunderstanding and half-decent proposal, they run off to this dangerous oil rig set piece. And the frying game, well, we all know how that one turned out. Or you could watch Homer the Mo, which somehow has both an unrelated Act 1 as well as an Act 3 swerve. This episode is so all over the place, some might call it postmodern. Say what you want about the Badger plot or the Surf's Up endings of the past, but at the very least, they had that self-awareness about them. You watch a Scully holdover like Homer the Mo, and you can see characters openly questioning this shaggy dog story or why an animal has to die. Whereas the rest of season 13 just kinda goes where the winds of the plot needs them to, without drawing attention to it. It's kind of a stylistic choice on which approach you like more, whether or not these self-conscious jokes make those Scully-era plots better. That isn't to say that season 13 doesn't have self-aware humor throughout, it definitely does. Season 13 prefers joking about smaller plot elements or hanging a hat on an obvious gag. It's like, oh, what a coincidence, the sugar factory is right down the street. Now how would you lasso a banana? Look, it's Lisa and she's winning us back. I would argue the self-awareness is a bit punchier here, more constrained to throwaway jokes. Instead, they take a more aggressive approach to their meta humor this year. We'll have pop-up video factoids with Comic Book Guy, faking out a Springfield Gorge clip show, or straight up commenting on and changing the tense background music. Doing an animation-centric episode like I Am Furious Yellow is obviously full of this kind of humor. My favorite is probably the Butterfingers joke though. Not even the fire wants them. I think season 13's general sense of humor is less on the unpredictable and subversive side. During the Scully years, you got the impression that they were always trying to keep the audience guessing, not doing the traditional punchlines. And don't get me wrong, season 13 has some solid screw the audience jokes. I mean, it's got the crowbar, which is a top tier example. But I wouldn't say it's season 13's forte. These screw the audience jokes really gotta sneak attack you, whereas season 13 prefers to telegraph its shtick. Its sense of humor is less sarcastic and more wacky and broad. The idea of, isn't that weird, is sort of the comedic ethos here. You get these movie ushers breaking off giant Kit Kats, overly sensitive telemarketers, a bunch of rioters exiting like a marching band. They do not one, but two different variations on characters slapping themselves. And for some reason, lots and lots of board game humor this year. It's like this rise of character-driven shtick, similar to something like the Muppets. Very easygoing, not especially mean-spirited or dark. Like, let's go back to Homer the Mo again, which seems to be our quintessential Scully holdover example today. This one is filled to the brim with dark humor, like the professor's suicide, these dead rabbits, and Homer refusing to give his robot legs. After Gene took over, instead we get sexually stimulating suicide machines, references to Oompa Loompas in cages, and the town drunk saying he'll expose himself in the mall. Most of the truly messed up implications are either subverted or conveniently happen off screen. Oh, and speaking of someone exposing himself, boy, I didn't think I'd ever use that as a segue. But we need to talk about season 13's favorite category of joke. So you remember back in season 3, how they were always lusting after the ladies and that rich, creamery butter? Well, 10 seasons later, now the show is obsessed with dicks. Dicks and urination jokes. I'm talking downtown. No, but seriously, go rewatch season 13 and clock this. It's like in every episode. A tinkling contest, Lenny watching REMP, Burns needing to expel some urine, the mummy is getting a boner, Milhouse wetting the bed, Ralph wetting himself, Homer needing to pee, Grandpa's Viagra kicking in, anyone for penis? Like, they'll do this silly old-timey joke with the space dog, and Bart helpfully observes it's a male dog. I swear I'm not crazy, this season is obsessed with penises. Although you could apply that obsession to how season 13 handles LGBT issues. Lots of jokes about women who used to be men. Let's just say this is an era of The Simpsons I wouldn't recommend to anyone in the trans community in particular. It's very much of that turn of the millennium attitude. It's weird, in some respects, season 13 feels like a less quote-unquote modern season than 11 and 12. We remember how those years would bring in guest stars like Kid Rock, Britney Spears, NSYNC, or do these stories centered around a new technology or trend. Whereas the reference pool in season 13 feels relatively more dated. We have these episodes like The Blunder Years, The Lastest Gun in the West, and Half Decent Proposal that explore the character's past, with numerous classic references throughout. Of course, season 13 is a more referential season in general. Maybe I shouldn't have positioned it as this baby boomer wonderland. It reminds me of season 4, how they'll do these punchy and oddly specific references for no reason. I don't know why we needed this Johnny Depp from Chocolat, but here it is. Moe in an Austin Powers costume? This Mr. Movie Phone guy? Why not? The Noid? Sure, throw him in. Like there's an episode that straight up ends with the family dancing around to Ghostbusters. Why? I don't know. We did a Slimer reference earlier. Endings are hard. Actually, if you really enjoy music as a whole, you'll probably love season 13. The writers love this sing-song characterization of Homer, where he'll delightfully break into song whenever possible. Season 13 also marks the rise of the Al Jean music montage. We did it! We made it to the Al Jean music montage era. Now The Simpsons always loved them some music montages, but season 13 is practically a jukebox musical. I want to see its overall budget, because it sometimes feels like 50% of it was spent on music rights. You'll get situations like Half Decent Proposal, that hits us with 70s songs Disco Inferno and Precious and Few, and then goes straight into a music cue from The Graduate. It uses the MASH theme for a parody, and the story begins and ends with 2 other pop songs. To be clear, I'm not knocking season 13 for having a lot of music. In fact, you could argue that it led to the return of the big movie parody sequence to The Simpsons. Love that stuff, glad it's back. But the amount of music is pretty noticeable. As for Hollywood stuff in general, season 13 does feature storylines linked to the entertainment industry, like Bart dating Rainier Wolfcastle's daughter, Bart hanging out with his former Western star, Bart starting up his own internet cartoon. Okay, so basically all Bart stories. Season 13 wasn't especially shy about famous people showing up in Springfield either. They'll have bands like REM and Phish play in Springfield, celebrities like Richard Gere or Stan Lee to hang out with the characters, smaller pop-ins by other celebrities. Of course, we did have notable guest stars playing new characters in season 13. Shoutouts to Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Delroy Lindo, Ben Stiller, Reese Witherspoon, Dennis Weaver, and Olympia Dukakis, who each had major supporting roles. John Lovitz reprised his role as Artie Ziff, and this marked the beginning of Jane Kasmerick's role as Judge Harm. And now, with the celebrities out of the way, it's time for our favorite segment, the Secondary Character Stock Watch. What the hell was that? Anyway, season 13 continued the Scully era's development of using Moe, Lenny, and Carl as a key component to Homer's storylines. They'll do a flashback episode with the gang, Moe gets a cell phone in a Spotlight episode. We even see Lenny and Homer go on an exciting Act 3 adventure. I think there's a strong case that these 3 are the most important secondary characters of the season, even if they're not necessarily the most omnipresent. That award goes to Chief Wiggum, as it always seems to. There's a surprising amount of Law & Order related plots, so Wiggum definitely comes in handy. I would say Skinner is probably the biggest loser here. After staging a comeback in season 12, Springfield Elementary mostly got ignored. Milhouse is really the only secondary kid they did much with. It's not the biggest Krusty or Flanders year either, but they're both at least consistently around. Other characters, like Apu and Grandpa, got Spotlight episodes to bolster their resumes. As for the biggest winner, it's definitely Mr. Burns. He's back, baby. They did a great job getting him involved early on, getting a villain turn, a Spotlight episode, a big reveal, and then a featured supporting role. I would say the show still definitely prefers using Moe to Mr. Burns. That trend has continued. But season 13 tried bringing Burns back to season 4 or 5 levels, still very much a prominent figure. As for the Simpson family, let's start with Homer. He's going to be the biggest topic this go around. Season 13 is like a tale of two Homers, as he moves between two eras. As discussed in the last few retrospectives, Scully-era Homer was a bit sharper and edgier, prone to bouts of jerkassery and these extreme mood swings. You can still see a bit of that edge early on. Homer does some hilariously callous things. As the year progresses, you can see Al Jean softening Homer up. He still gets super angry, of course. I Am Furious Yellow is all about that. But it is more of a wacky, directionless rage. The goal of the story is to deconstruct Homer's anger issue. Season 13 is interested in who Homer is, his trauma in his past, what his dynamic would be like without wacky adventures. Homer still has his big chaotic personality, constantly singing and screaming and obsessing over food, but it feels like a more easygoing and well-meaning chaos. As for Marge, I guess I would describe her year as domestic. She mostly gets relationship storylines with Homer, will occasionally meddle in others' lives. Her spotlight episode is centered around food, she gets a subplot about paper towels, and her treehouse of horror is a combination of all of the above. I like how in Brawl in the Family, they give her that obsessive joke about being overly prepared for dinner, because that sure is the Marge experience right now. Marge does have some amazing jokes, of course. She's just kinda trapped in the 1950s. Lisa got to branch out a bit more in season 13. She mostly serves as that supporting character, existing to point out stuff, assist Homer, comment on the issues, or make fun of a given storyline. Still, I think they do a better job this year getting the introspective side of Lisa, her Buddhism journey challenging her core beliefs, and then these college students providing her a tantalizing glimpse at a new world. The show is less likely to dump on Lisa as season 13 marches on. It's overall more sympathetic to her struggles. As for Bart, I would call season 13 his year of regrets. A lot of Bart's storylines revolve around him doing something bad and then feeling guilty about it. He gets two of these kind of stories with Homer, for example. Or he'll treat Greta Wolfcastle badly and then try to win her back. I wouldn't say it's an especially deep or nuanced year for Bart. They don't really explore any of his relationships in much detail. Bart's just here to make a mess and watch the carnage happen. Special shout out to Maggie, who very quietly crushed season 13. Can't argue with a season where her thoughts save the earth from destruction and she shoots all the mafia guys. Good job, Maggie. As a whole, there's a big downward feeling to season 13. Not in the LOL Simpsons bad, show going downhill sort of way, because quality-wise, I don't think it's worse than the previous two seasons by any means. But going from seasons 8 to 9 to 10 to 11, there was always this sort of upward feeling in terms of the show becoming more experimental and weird. There was that wispy quality to season 11, that it was the sort of peak of The Simpsons at its most wacky, irreverent, sarcastic, and trickstery. And then season 12 is like that minor adjustment back toward the middle. Season 13 feels like another small step toward a more grounded and balanced show. It's very much like season 12 in terms of execution of story, with these plot swerves and dangerous situations. Structurally, the show changed very little. But I think season 13's stronger focus on character-driven stories and humor makes it stand out. Even when doing the most cuckoo bananas narratives, like Blame It on Lisa or The Frying Game, it doesn't set aside exploring the characters or their relationships. It's a strange marriage of elements, this season 13. It's like taking the characterization of season 3 and dumping it in season 10 plots. It results in a flavor that is arguably more balanced, but some of the ingredients don't always mesh together that well. It's like the cheesecake of Simpson seasons. Sometimes it's awesome, other times, I'd rather just have cake. Next time, I'll be back with the top 10 to separate out the cheeses from the cakes from the cheesecakes of season 13. I don't know what this metaphor is anymore. All those Homer food jokes have clearly seeped into my brain. Maybe Springfield was right with that sugar ban. As always, thanks for watching.